on behalf of Google Cloud Security to make sense of threat intelligence, a seasoned cybersecurity professional with over 19 years working in the industry who specialises in cyber defence, worked across various Australian government agencies leading their digital forensic teams before now applying his trade at Mandiant Google Cloud as a principal consultant and VCISO. Please welcome Brent Muir to the stage. Brent, all yours.
Thanks, Spencer. Thank you. Hi all, thank you. Thank you for attending this session. I know I'm standing between you and drinks, so it's nice of you to turn up. If you're like me, you're probably pretty tired right now. I'm exhausted personally, but anyway, I'm happy to be here. So as Spencer mentioned, I'm a virtual CISO and principal consultant with Mandiant, which is a part of Google Cloud Security. And today I'm here to talk to you about making sense of threat intelligence. And trust me, I didn't mean to make that rhyme when I came up with the title, so I only just figured that out today. I'm like, oh, terrible. So when we're talking about threat intelligence, we're actually going to be talking about different types and different aspects of threat intelligence. We're going to be talking about the tactical uses, the operational uses, and the strategic uses of threat intelligence. So hopefully you can take something away from this. And here it is behind me. This is the crux of the presentation. So this is the Intelligence Capability Development Framework. So this is a maturity model for taking your threat intelligence program and bringing it to where it needs to be from a maturity perspective. If we look right on the left side, you'll see the foundational aspects of the model. The first one being the cyber threat profile. So this underpins everything else we have in the model. So a cyber threat profile is looking at the threat actors who are targeting your organization, the reasons, the motivations behind why they're targeting your organization or your industry vertical, and then looking internally at your own assets and discovering what would be of value to an attacker. So what are they targeting within your organization? Once we have the threat profile determined, we move on to the stakeholder analysis. So obviously for different types of threat intelligence, we have different consumers. For example, if you're talking about tactical threat intelligence, indicators of compromise and the like, you're not going to give a list of indicators of compromise to a C-suite team member or executive team member because it doesn't make any sense to them. They can't derive any value from that. So you need to be skewing your threat intelligence products and your output to the right stakeholders within your business. And thirdly, we've got the intelligence requirements. So this is the categorization, prioritization of your threat intelligence. Then we move on up the maturity curve to implementing practices. The first part there is the CTI lifecycle, cyber threat intelligence lifecycle. So if we go back to a really simplistic example of an indicator of compromise being a known malicious IP address, it might be malicious today, but 6 months down the track, it's now being reused, repurposed by a legitimate website. So you need to manage your threat intelligence. There's no point chasing false positives that are 10 years out of date because you've been consuming threat intelligence and not managing it from that life cycle perspective. So you need to do your CTI life cycle. And secondly, you need to focus on your technology, tooling, integration. So how are you going to consume your threat intelligence? And it could be through your SIEM, through your SOAR, through your EDRs, through your network devices, firewalls, IDS, etc. So it's understanding where you're going to derive the most value from your threat intelligence from a technology stack perspective. And then finally, right up the pointy end or the niche end of the framework is realizing capabilities. And this is where your operational uses and your strategic uses of threat intelligence really come into play. And we're going to talk about all three types as we move forward. But what I want you to take away from this slide is that this framework underpins everything else we're going to be talking about, and we'll be referring back to it a little bit as we move forward. But before we move on too much, we need to talk about what is the definition of threat intelligence. So within the industry, there's a big difference between information or data and intelligence. To give you a good example, if you're given a hash value, what does it mean? Could be good, could be bad, who knows? Without any context behind that hash value, you don't know what it's there for. And so making data or turning data into intelligence is by conducting that analytical perspective and adding the context and building relationships between data points so that you can understand that that hash value belongs to a malicious threat actor and a piece of their malware that they use for part of their campaigns. So within Mandiant, we have 3 criteria for threat intelligence. It needs to be accurate, it needs to be timely, and it needs to be actionable. And we'll talk about that further as we move through. So as I mentioned, we're going to be talking about 3 different types of threat intelligence. First one being tactical. So when we're thinking about tactical, we're talking about working with your security operations teams, your incident response teams, the teams who require access to indicators of compromise in a timely manner so they can take reactive steps such as detection or protection by blocking, for example. Operational is focused on understanding the adversary's capabilities, their TTPs, etc. And for the operational perspective, we're aligning the stakeholders with the security control owners, the business owners, application owners, and the like. And then finally, strategic, we're talking about working with your C-suite, with your executive team, and we're talking about understanding the trends and analysis and the motivations behind those threat actors who are targeting your organization, the reasons why, and how they can use that knowledge and that threat intelligence to derive strategic priorities and buy down the risk for the organization. So this is the pyramid of pain. You may have seen this similar kind of diagram used in other presentations. Basically, it goes from the easiest at the bottom all the way to the pointy end at the top, which is the most difficult. So when we overlay the different types of threat intelligence to the pyramid of pain, we have the tactical down the bottom, and the tactical is the easiest. We're looking at the activities, IP addresses, hash values of a campaign, for example, and then moving up the pyramid, we have the operational, so we're looking at the characteristics of the campaigns. Where's that activity being seen? How often is it occurring? Who are they targeting? Why are they targeting? And then finally, at the identity. So at the strategic end, we're looking at the identity of the campaign actors. So we're looking at who has the means, motivations, and opportunity. And so for each of those 3 different types of threat intelligence, there's different products and outputs. So if we think about the tactical threat intelligence, again, we're talking more around IOC lists, indicators of compromise, indicators of attack. For operational intelligence, we're talking about conducting threat hunts, threat modeling, those kind of aspects, kind of short to medium term strategic priorities in terms of mapping back to security control postures and looking at increasing your cybersecurity maturity and hygiene. And on the strategic end, we're talking about executive briefs, building out those long-term strategic decisions around the threat actors who are targeting or potentially targeting your organization. So very different there. So we're going to be talking about all 3 types of threat intelligence, and we're going to give examples for each. But if we go back to the tactical for a quick second, I touched on indicators of compromise. If you're not aware, Google has a threat intelligence platform called GTI these days. It was previously known as Mandiant Advantage Threat Intelligence, or MATI for short. And so Mandiant, we conduct about, I think it was 450,000 hours last year in 2024 of incident response activities for our clients. So 450,000 hours worth of activities where we identify these indicators of compromise, we ingest them into our GTI platform. Also, since the Google acquisition, we have now incorporated the threat analysis group tag, Google tag team, as well as the VirusTotal platform into that one GTI platform. So it's very valuable, but the most valuable part is those indicators of compromise that are unique to Mandiant based on our investigations. So if we think back to those 3 criteria, it needs to be accurate. So these are indicators that we have validated through our investigations. It needs to be timely. Again, it's coming directly from these campaigns that we're investigating, and it needs to be actionable. So from an actionable perspective, we can take those indicators of compromise and we can add them into our SIEM for detection capabilities. We can also add them into our protection capabilities as well, so from a blocking perspective, so it is actionable. So I just wanted to give you that as a really simplistic example, I guess, of tactical intelligence. And I'll give you one more, but first I need to introduce or not. Oops, I'm hitting the wrong button. That's user error. Apologies. The Mandiant attack lifecycle. There's too many buttons. Just need one button, that's fine. So the Mandiant attack lifecycle is similar to the MITRE attack framework or the Lockheed Martin cyber kill chain framework. But the reason we use this particular model is we found it's more conducive for storytelling. Additionally, it covers that non-linear nature of threat activities and threat campaigns. So if you look there in the middle, you'll see internal recon, escalating privileges, lateral movement, persistence mechanisms. Those kind of activities happen all the time in a campaign. They're not just one and done. You see threat actors repeating those steps throughout their campaign. So once they compromise a different host, they might put another backdoor. They might, escalate privileges on that host, et cetera, as they move on before they get to their final actions on objectives or complete their mission. So I just want to introduce that quickly because it factors into the next example. So this is another tactical example. We were recently engaged to conduct a network breach assessment. For those of you who may not be aware of that term, this is where we come in and we assume breach. So we assume the mantra of the adversary is already operating inside your environment, you're just unaware. So to conduct a breach assessment, we'll come in, we collect the telemetry and the data from the client organization, and occasionally we'll deploy additional sensors, network sensors, depending on the kind of visibility that they currently have. And then we'll analyze that. And one thing we always do is correlate that back to that GTI, to our threat intelligence platform, looking at our own IOCs. So in this particular example, the client didn't expect us to find much of anything. They had EDR, they had firewalls, they had security controls in place. They didn't think we were going to find much of anything at all. However, when we conducted that correlation work, we identified UNC5698. So UNC, for those of you who are unaware, stands for uncategorized. So when we're conducting our investigations, this is a little sidebar, we don't attribute these campaigns to a particular threat actor. We collect all the details and we put them together and we say, okay, this is an uncategorized group. We don't promote to an official group like an APT, Advanced Persistent Threat, until we've got enough data points to say, yes, there's enough infrastructure overlap or malware tooling overlap or whatever it is to actually promote that. So until that point, we call it UNC. So this is an uncategorized group, 5698. This is a cyber espionage group. So cyber espionage meaning they want to steal your data for espionage purposes. In this case, one of their malware tools of choice we have dubbed Hoplite. And what is novel about this particular piece of malware is that it conducts exfiltration from this malware via webhooks, typically Telegram, sometimes Discord. So in this particular example with this particular client, we identified this exfiltration via this tool, via Discord. And the reason the client hadn't detected this activity prior to this point is for two reasons. The first reason was they didn't have enough visibility in their Discord traffic going out of the organization. Secondly, they didn't have this particular indicator of compromise to say, this is known bad activity here. So by using this tactical threat intelligence, we were able to firstly discover this activity occurring through threat hunting, and then we were able to then remediate and block it and move forward and work with the client to rectify their situation. But I just want to bring that up because it's quite a very succinct, useful example of tactical threat intelligence. And you've probably all heard tactical examples before, so we're going to move on to operational examples. And the first one is threat modeling. So if we think back to the framework at the start, right on the left side, we had that cyber threat profile. That was discovering the attackers who were targeting your organization, the reasons and motivations behind why they're targeting your organization, as well as what assets internally they're most likely to target. So taking that cyber threat profile knowledge, you can then start conducting a threat modeling exercise. This is where you take the TTPs, for example, from that threat actor, and then map them back to your internal infrastructure and resources, looking at that attack path to figure out how the threat actor would gain access to your infrastructure. So it's a very useful exercise, and it actually feeds into our next couple of examples for operational threat modeling. So just want to introduce that quickly. And the next example is through crown jewel assessments. So a crown jewel, for those of you who may not be familiar with that term, is a critical or the most critical assets within an organization. Mandiant approaches this very differently to other organizations in that we take a threat lens or threat perspective overlay looking at your assets. So a perfect example would be Active Directory. In a lot of organizations, an Active Directory is considered a crown jewel asset. Within the Mandiant framework, we probably wouldn't consider that a crown jewel. And that's because if you think about the threat actors who are targeting your organization, there's probably little value in compromising that Active Directory directly. It doesn't store data. So if you're thinking about a financially motivated threat actor, for example, there's probably unlikely to be any data of value that they can monetize on that Active Directory asset. So we actually give 3 different designations for crown jewel assets. We have the crown jewel assets that are actually storing data of value to a threat actor or likely to be targeted by a threat actor. Then we have infrastructure assets. These are the ones that support and underpin those crown jewels. So in this case, Active Directory is typically considered an infrastructure asset. And then we have essential services. So essential services are ones where you have a shared responsibility model for managing, and cloud is a typical example there. So if you think about a SaaS platform, maybe like ServiceNow, you as a client might be a consumer of that platform, but you have a shared responsibility model for actually managing the configuration and the underlying infrastructure with ServiceNow as your vendor. So we would consider that an essential service. So going back to the operational example, once you've identified those crown jewel assets, you've identified the ones that are of most value to the threat actors who are targeting your organization, you then conduct that threat modeling piece to figure out how would the threat actor get access to these particular assets. Once you've conducted that threat modeling piece, you can then go back and look at the security control posture to mitigate or detect that campaign or that activity. And so by using this method, you can prioritize your investments and where you're spending your resourcing in uplifting your cybersecurity hygiene mapped back to that attack path. Okay, and the last example for operational is in the software development lifecycle, so specifically in the design phase. So again, we're taking your threat modeling approach, but instead of threat modeling against your infrastructure, we're threat modeling against your application development. So what that means is you're working, you're educating your software development teams as they're designing the application, ensuring you've got the correct, appropriate security controls in place to secure the application, the data that is processed or stored within that application, as well as the users who are accessing and using that application. And you map that back to real-world threat actors and campaigns. And at the end of it, you should have a more robust and secure application before you even go live. So you can actually define that design of the application before go-live stages, and that you make sure you've got the appropriate controls in place. So it's another real-world example of leveraging operational threat intelligence to help drive business value. Okay, and now for a strategic example. So this is on prioritizing investment. When we speak to vCISOs, CISOs, security teams, a lot of times they say to us, look, we know we've got issues with our overall cybersecurity hygiene. We need to put in all these different security controls, but how do we prioritize? How do we decide what is going to give us the most value, the most risk buy down for the organization? And that's when we take an approach that looks at a threat category risk framework. So what that means is we look at the threats that are likely to be seen in your organization over the next, say, 12, 24 months. So it could be ransomware, phishing, malware, data breach, whatever. And then we look at the cost of remediation for those particular security incidents. So you look at your recovery costs, your remediation costs, etc. And so you take the likelihood of a threat occurring, the cost of remediation and recovery for that particular threat vector, and then conversely, you look at that security control mapping that you've done previously, and you look at what would actually mitigate this particular threat vector. So to give an example, you might assume that ransomware is going to be a huge problem within the next 24 months. You're seeing other peer organizations being hit by ransomware, and you've got a few issues that you've identified that you need to increase your cybersecurity posture and your hygiene to mitigate that. So you might say, well, it's going to cost $2.5 million to restore and recover from a ransomware attack, not including all your long-term reputational damage potentially, but just recovery costs and remediation costs. And conversely, you might look at it and say, look, if we put in application allow listing, it's going to mitigate 90% of the risk coming from ransomware, malware, and a few other vectors. And so you might say, well, application allow listing is going to cost $500,000 to implement. So then you can take that information and take that framework and you start to prioritize where you want to see your investment. You can take that to your board or to your financial audit committees or whoever's assigning your budget for each year, and you say, look, the likelihood of this occurring, this particular threat vector occurring is going to be 20% or 90%. The cost to recover is going to be X. The cost to mitigate it is much lower. We should prioritize here. And so you can start to use that framework and that strategic threat intelligence to help shape those discussions with your financial teams, which is really valuable. Okay, I'm actually running really fast, so I apologize for talking too quickly. But there are 4 main key takeaways from today's session that I'd like you to be cognizant of. First one is that threat intelligence should be informing the business. It shouldn't just be working with your threat intelligence team. It shouldn't just be working with your SOC. It should be informing your application owners, business owners, your infrastructure owners, your C-suite, your executive team. All those different areas of your business should be being informed by your threat intelligence team and function. Secondly, you need to understand your adversaries. So again, this goes back to that first framework slide, the cyber threat profile. It's very easy to do. You should all be conducting that. It's your first step in building your threat intelligence program internally. You've got to identify which adversaries are targeting you or likely to target you and why. Next is to understand your stakeholders. So again, that stakeholder analysis aspect is very important. As I mentioned, the C-suite don't want to see a list of IOCs. What value is that going to give them if they see a big list of IOCs? Doesn't mean anything to them. You need to frame your products, your threat intelligence output, to the stakeholders you're working with. And lastly, you've got to demonstrate the benefits. And in my opinion, the easiest way to demonstrate the benefits of threat intelligence is via that threat modeling piece. So the next time you've got a new project kicking off or a new application being developed, you should conduct that threat modeling with that application or that project team and start working on building out a more robust and secure project or application stack. And there's many threat modeling frameworks out there. You've got Stride, you've got Pastor and the like. If you're considering implementing any artificial intelligence AI platforms or leveraging third-party AI platforms, there's a new threat modeling framework called Maestro, just got released a couple of weeks ago. It's very worthwhile having a read of that, so you can actually develop the guardrails and security controls for securing that AI stack before you start implementing it in a real-world environment, in a production environment. And that's basically it for me. I've still got some time left. So just lastly, thank you all for attending. Hopefully you're heading to the gala dinner or you're having a drink, and if so, come and say hi. I'll be around tomorrow at the Google booth, Google Cloud Security booth in the exhibition room. If you want to come and have a chat. If you'd like to have a demo of GTI, our threat intelligence platform, we can run that for you. Additionally, we can give you a demo of our SecOps platform, formerly known as Chronicle, formerly known as Backstory. It's got a few names. We can show you how we've integrated our AI LLM models, so security models built around incident response investigations, and you can actually derive value directly from that platform, reducing the amount of time you spend conducting analysis and responding to threats within your environment. Otherwise, I'm happy to chat about anything else. These days, I work on cyber deception programs, so if that's something that interests you as well, come and have a chat. But yeah, thank you so much for your time. Thank you. You want this one?
Thank you, Brent. You've been an absolute MC's dream because you finished a couple of minutes in advance of time, which is great. So I was going to ask you, if people did go to the Google Cloud desk, what would they experience? You've run through all of that. So the question on everyone's lips, are you giving away socks?
I should have worn my Google socks. I'm wearing platypus, though, because it's Australia.
There you
so
go.
That's pretty good. No, we've got no swag this year. But however, you can win a guitar.
Oh, that was you guys.
That's us. So come to the stand.
There's an awesome electric guitar.
Scan you.
Yeah. And there's an electric guitar up for grabs. You take your Lego with you.
Oh, beautiful.
Give Brent a round of applause. Thank you so much, mate. Fantastic stuff. Go and see him at the Google Cloud Security tent. Store within the tent, and there is a rock and electric guitar there to be won by someone today or tomorrow. We draw all those tomorrow afternoon just before the speed debate. Couple of quick things if you are. Once we're done here, please move outside nice and quickly because I have to strip all these tables out and turn it into our dinner venue in a matter of just an hour and a half. Bang. Hour and a half from now, 6:30 is when we'll be out at the Events Centre Terrace if you are going to the gala dinner. If you're not, enjoy yourself in and around the confines of the Star. If you are coming tonight, please make sure you come through the glass door of the Events Centre. Don't try and sneak in through anywhere else. You've got to come and you've got to clearly have your conference badge with you to gain entry to our gala dinner. Thank you so much, Brent. And before that, Marek, how about another round of applause for our two speakers? If you're not here tonight at the dinner, I'll see you at 9 o'clock tomorrow morning. Otherwise, at the dinner.